Okay, let's get started. Okay, we should have 60 people in this class. Okay, sounds a bit weird. Is it better? Okay, this probably is not very useful. Okay, can anyone in the back hear me? Everyone can hear me? Okay, good. Okay, so welcome to this class. It's 4-turn, 5-turn special topic, software security. So my name is Zemin Zhao. So we are meeting in this room every Monday, 5 to 7:50. I probably will ask the department to push this class maybe 10 minutes later, so we can start at 5:10, because you can see the previous class ends at 5. It doesn't make sense. Okay. So I want to let you know that I'm recording all the classes, and I'm releasing all the recordings, everything on YouTube. And also there is a web page for this class. You can find everything on that web page, including lecture notes, homework, recordings, everything. For this class, I hope you can have a notebook in front of you so you can take notes. Sometimes we need to draw things for example, we need to draw the stack, how the stack changes, try to understand how to hack it. And from the second class, you probably need to have the hacking environment ready. So you probably should have a laptop in front of you. I will give you a virtual machine to use, but you don't have to use the virtual machine. You can use your own laptop, set up everything by yourself. But on that virtual machine, I already set up everything. I will release it maybe tomorrow morning. Still something. Last time I teach this class was a year ago, and I tried the virtual machine today. There are too many updates, so I'm going to fix that. In this class, feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions, but the university does require all of us to wear a face mask in this semester. Also, we have a Slack channel. So I think most of you already got an invitation from the TA. The TA will send you the invitation to the Slack channel. So we can discuss all kinds of things on that Slack channel. A little bit about myself. My name is Zemin. I'm an assistant professor in the computer science and engineering department. I direct a research lab of my own. I call it Cyberspace Security and Forensics Lab. So you can see that I try to come up with a very big name that can capture everything in security. Because I consider myself as a full stack security researcher. I do all kinds of security things, attack, defense. But actually right now we are mainly focusing on several areas. Also my lab, we have a nickname, Cacti Lab, only because I lived in Arizona for too long. So right now we mainly focus on system security and software security, especially for embedded devices. Those very low-end embedded devices like your something like this, okay, a microphone. There is a chip inside. We try to hack those kind of things, protect those kind of things. So I used to work on mobile, PC, but right now we're focusing on those things. So I have an office hour Wednesday, 1 to 2:30, and the office hour will be online. So last year we did everything online, and it was okay. It was not that bad. Especially for this class, the office hour, I'm going to show you a lot of things. You will also show me a lot of things in your terminal, in your screen. So actually online office hour is not a bad idea. And also I'm usually available if you just ping me on Slack. You just ping me on Slack, you want to schedule a meeting, we can meet. Also, we have a teaching assistant, Toma. He's not here. He's my PhD student. So his office hour will be Friday, and we're using the same link. So sometimes I will also join his office hour. The office hour will also be recorded, but right now I probably will not release it on YouTube. So a little bit about my lab. We are working on embedded system and software security, mainly on ARM Cortex-A, Cortex-M, RISC-V architectures, and also work on FPGA. So Cortex-M, those are very low-end devices. They are in your something like your Fitbit, your health monitor. Cortex-A are your phones. Some of your are also your tablets. Some of your laptop probably are using Cortex-A. For example, the new Apple Mac, they have a special CPU called the Apple M1 or something. That is actually Cortex-A. RISC-V is a new architecture started from UC Berkeley, and it's the first very popular open source architecture. That's why ARM is not open source, Intel is not open source, but the RISC-V is open source. So it's get a lot of traction recently. We also have worked on FPGA security. Besides those hardcore system and software security, we also work on machine learning security, deep learning security, autonomous driving security, also formal methods to verify properties of crypto protocols and also operating system code. Also, I'm touching blockchain security right now, and also we have been doing all kinds of hackings. So we are building our own CTF platform right now. And the difference between our CTF and the existing ones is our CTF will be the one that support all kinds of platforms. So there are a lot of CTF platforms available. So one of them is Palm College, developed at Arizona State by my very good friends there. So Palm College is a very famous one, but if you log in, you play there, you can see all the challenges are for x86. So what we want to do is we want to do challenges for Cortex-M, Cortex-A as well, and other platforms. Also, my vision for IoT platform is we want to build something like Roblox. So how many of you played Roblox before? Okay. Wow, only two? So you are the only three? Yeah. It's usually for kids, yeah. But for Roblox, a lot of kids playing those games, and also you can develop games. So my vision for those CTF platform is we're going to build something like Roblox for hacking. So you can go there to solve those CTF challenges, and you can also build your own challenges, and you can get points for that. So that's we have a team work on that as well. So in short, we need students at all levels for funded research or volunteer work, or even independent study. So if you want to work with me, shoot me your email. Let's see if we can find something interesting for you to work on. Okay, so this class, this is actually the first time I offer this class as a cross listing. So we have a 410 and 510. Last year, I offered this as a 610. But I actually opened it up to everyone. So the first class, there were 100 undergraduates showed up. However, the second class, probably 50, the third class, and 10 undergraduates. Okay, so this year I opened it up to 410. So right now there are 20 undergraduates, 40 graduates, some of them are PhD, some are masters. And all of you are invited to this Slack channel. This is a Slack channel I organize all kinds of CTFs. We participate in all CTFs and also classes. So all of you are invited there. So there is no difference if you are taking this as 410 or 510. You are doing the same homework, same exam, everything the same. So the goal of this course is to provide you with good understanding of the theories, principles, techniques, and tools used for manual software and system hacking. I emphasize the word manual because right now the research is mainly about automatic software and system hacking. But that's not what we are going to cover in this class. In this class, it's all about getting your hands dirty. You hack everything by yourself. You write exploits by yourself. But if you are really into this, you can take my next class, which is Advanced Software Security. In that class, we talk about how to develop systems to automatically find vulnerabilities and also exploit the vulnerabilities in the systems. So this class is mainly about hacking binaries. We use x86 binaries as an example, but the principles, the techniques you learn in this class should be applicable to other architecture as well. So we don't talk about high-level applications, for example, Java, web software, Python. Those security problems are out of the scope of this class. There are professors in our department who offer web security. So web security is a totally different area, I would say. It deserves its own class. So we're not covering that. For example, when we talk about battery class, usually battery software run on top of operating system, and some of them are firmware directly run on top of the hardware. But web applications like JavaScript, they run on top of the web browser, right? So the browser plays the role of the OS. The browser provides all kinds of services to those apps. So a lot of techniques, ideas are similar, but there are different layers. So in this class, we were, like I said, we were mainly use x86. You will learn in-depth binary, reverse engineering, all kinds of vulnerability classes, how to do vulnerability analysis, how to write exploits. Usually exploits are very small, just 20, 30 bytes, 20, 30 lines of assembly code. So it's not that difficult. We will also talk about all kinds of defensive solutions. When we hack something, we talk about the state-of-art solutions to defend those attacks. So basically, you learn how to crack a native software and also protect native software. So in this class, you will get your hands very dirty. That's what we do. Also in the class, I will do a lot of demos. We're going to see a lot of C code. We'll see a lot of disassembly code. And after the class, in the homework, you will basically redo all of those. And also there will be assignments and the CTFs. So today we will just go through the class overview and some logistics. Then we will talk about background knowledge. We will talk about how compiler, linker, loader works, x86, x64 architecture, and several instructions. I will talk about Linux file permissions, what are setuid programs, the memory map of the process, what are system calls, environment and shell variables, and some basic reverse engineering. So we will talk a little bit about ELF file format, but the next class, week 3. So actually the second week we don't have a class. So week 3, we will spend at least 1.5 hours talking about ELF file format because it's very complicated and it's very important for you to understand how OS work, how loader work. Today we will just have an overview. So I think I didn't list any prerequisite for this class. The real prerequisite for this class is just the C programming. You should be comfortable at programming in C. You should be able to read C code, understand where is the variables, where are the variables located. Those are the very basic things. We are going to a layer under C, but we are going to map C to assembly and disassembly. There are several classes that can help you understand this one. For example, 220 systems programming. That's a very good class. That one teaches you how to do Linux programming, basically teaches you the APIs libc give you, and also the APIs Linux libraries give you. That would be very useful. Also 421 Introduction to OS or 521 OS. Those will also be very helpful, but they're not required because I'm trying to make this class self-contained. I believe hacking is something everyone can learn from scratch. Even high schooler can do it. That's why I'm making this class 410. But to do that, we need to go through all the background. So I'm trying to cover those in the class. If you are not really familiar with C, I just recommend you this classic C programming language book written by the authors of C. You can find this book just online or just go to UB library, search the book. You should be able to find a PDF version. So this book is not only about the syntax of C. Probably the first 2-3 chapters about the syntax, but it teaches a lot about the C libraries. Okay, so this is not a book about the, I think most of you probably read a part of this book before. So there is like several chapters dedicated talking about the standard C library. So after reading this book, you will be a pretty good C developer. Also in this class, we are going to use a lot of reverse engineering tools, including those terminal-based ones like object-dump, also IDA-Pro, Ghidra. So for all my demos, I'm trying to use simple tools like object-dump because that can help us really understand what's going on. If we use more advanced tools like IDA-Pro or Ghidra, the tool will do a lot of automatic analysis for you. So you probably don't understand what's going on. For example, Ghidra actually have a free decompiler. You give Ghidra a binary code, Ghidra will generate C code for you. Then to understand that binary, you can just read the C code. It will be much easier for you to understand. But the C code doesn't capture everything, what is really going on in the system. The C code doesn't have the address of the variables. So we're going to mainly working on the binary level. IDA-Pro is also a very good tool we use, but the very good version is not free and it's very expensive. Debugging, we are also using simple tools like GDB. We are going to use some plugins like PongGDB it has a pretty nice terminal-based interface to show you things you need. I installed all of those things on the virtual machine, but like I said, I mean, you are free to install your own environment. You can actually learn a lot by doing that. So like doing research in this class, the most important skill for you is just Googling, reading, and getting your head dirty, just a hack. That's the most important skill you will learn in this class, I hope. Those are most important skills for your research as well if you later go to graduate school. So we will mainly cover those topics in this semester. Probably I will change this a little bit and some new things. You will learn all kinds of software vulnerabilities at binary level, develop exploits. Most of those vulnerabilities, we call them memory corruption vulnerabilities. So they are on memory. Those are those categories. The first one is stack-based overflow. That was the first, maybe the first software vulnerability category discovered back in the 80s, I think. Before that, when people talk about security, most people are talking about data security or communication security. But in the 80s, we don't really know who discovered this. There is a very famous paper on Slack, I think. It's called a Smash the Stack for Fine Profit. So that paper article was published by a pseudonym called Alpha One, I think. You can still find that article online. So that article was the first well-written one to document how do you actually carry out stack-based buffer overflow. But that the author was not the one who discovered this. No one can know who discovered this. And also there was a professor, no, yeah, he is a professor at MIT right now, Robert Morris. So he was a master student or PhD student at Cornell in the 80s. So he developed the Morris worm and took down like 20% of the internet at that time. So that one was utilizing, exploiting some stack-based buffer overflow vulnerability. So we will start from there. But a stack-based buffer overflow right now is very hard to exploit because after 30 years, there are a lot of development in securing software from those buffer overflows. So we will spend some time talking about the state-of-the-art defense. Then we will talk about how to write shellcode, x86 shellcode, how to, there are a lot of tricks and how to make your shellcode to bypass all kinds of constraints. Then we will talk about format string vulnerability. This one is a little bit tricky, very powerful, but a little bit difficult to develop exploit. Then we will talk about heap-based buffer overflow. This one has been very useful to hack real-world software in the last maybe 20 years. A lot of heap-based buffer overflow was used to hack browsers. That's a lot of drive-by. So we don't use the word very often anymore. 10 years ago, a lot of people talking about drive-by download. It means you just visit a website, somehow you get hacked. You don't really know what's going on. So usually it's because that website has some JavaScript and you just, your browser will automatically run those JavaScript. And that JavaScript will exploit some vulnerability, software vulnerability in your browser and use that as a springboard to get to your OS and eventually get full control of your computer. So you didn't do anything wrong. I mean, you just visited a website. Okay, and that website could be a legit website. So a lot of those attacks, heap-based buffer overflow is part of that. Then there are integer overflows we'll talk about. We will also cover, we will spend probably 2-3 weeks on return-oriented programming, which is a very, very interesting topic. And it's totally different from the previous attacks. In return-oriented programming, so in stack-based buffer overflow or even heap-based, you are trying to inject some malicious code into the victim process. You design some payload. The payload can maybe read a sensitive file, and you inject that payload somehow into the victim process and execute that payload. But return-oriented programming, you're not injecting anything. You're just trying to find gadgets in the victim program, and you connect those gadgets together and do anything you want. So that's so we can say before that, there have been a lot of defense to stop you from injecting code. Then back in, so return-oriented programming was proposed in, I think it's probably 2008 or 2009. There was a CCS paper. CCS is one of our top conferences. There was a CCS paper talking about return-oriented programming, and it's a single author paper by a UCSD professor. So basically, he realized he discovered something very, very important and decided to publish the paper just a single author by himself. So That's basically what we're going to talk about. If we have time, we can talk a little bit about cache side channel attacks, such as Meltdown, Spectral. Some of you probably heard of that. So I actually worked on those topics. And last year, I spent one class talking about that. But this year, I want to cover more topics in software security. Probably we're not going to talk about that. There are several books and papers I recommend to you. The first one is this book, Practical Binary Analysis. This is a very useful reference book. I still read this book, but this book is mainly about automatic analysis, which we're not going to cover in this class. But it does have some background knowledge, which is the same as what we use for this class. Then there are several papers I recommend. They are relatively new, published in the recent 10 years. The first, so all three papers published in the same conference called IEEE Security and Privacy. That is our top of the top conference in security for all kinds of security problems. We try to, that's we have 4 security conference one is IEEE Security and Privacy. Another one is ACM CSE, which is Computer and Communication Security. The third one is Usenix Security. Usenix Security is my favorite because it has all kinds of cool hacking, like hacking cars, hacking ATMs. They publish all kinds of so the flavor is a little bit like a Black Hat. The last one is called NDSS, Network and Distributed System Security, I think. Yeah. So those 4 conferences, they are very, very difficult to have published papers there. For example, IEEE Security and Privacy, right now the acceptance rate is usually 16%, something like that. Okay. So you can see all 3 papers, they have the title SOK. So SOK basically means it's a survey paper. Only this conference accept survey papers. SOK means systemization of knowledge. So basically the survey paper. So those 3 papers I recommend. The first one is called Eternal War in Memory. It's talk about all kinds of memory corruption attacks, how to defend those. So I would say our class, this class, is basically wrapped around the first paper. We cover most of the things in that paper in the whole semester, but they just combine everything into a 16-page, 13-page paper. The second one is published by my very good friend back in Arizona. So this one, they call it the Art of War. They talk about all kinds of offensive techniques in binary analysis, basically attacks, automatic attacks in this. So those guys, they developed a very famous tool called Anger to do binary. The third paper is Shining Light on Shadow Stacks. So shadow stack is one way to protect softwares from being hacked by this kind of stack overflow. So because stack overflow is trying to hack the stack, and shadow stack is like have another copy of the stack. So this paper summarizes all the defense on shadow stack, and also this book. You don't have to buy this, but if you are really into this, this is a book I recommend to you. So the hacking environment we use in this class is just a regular PC. For 95% of this class, I would say it doesn't really matter if your old laptop is Intel-based or AMD-based. But if you use a Mac with the new M1 chip, I'm not sure if it works. Anyone here use that new Mac? You are using that? Okay. So you can try tell me if it works. I'm not sure. Yeah. Because M1 is actually Cortex, it's not x86. So at OS layer, we will use Linux. I will give you the VirtualBox virtual machine. And in that virtual machine, I already installed those tools to help you. Also, a Battery Ninja, I think I probably didn't install Battery Ninja, but for Battery Ninja, there is a web version. You can just um, open your browser. You can use Battery Ninja. It's free. And they have a decompiler everything, so it's a very good tool. Like I said, you're not required to use this environment. You can install all the tools by yourself on your local Linux box. There are some Linux distributions like Kali Linux. They pre-installed a lot of tools. Maybe you can start from there. But I just install everything on Ubuntu because my work environment is Ubuntu. So if you use Windows or Mac, I cannot promise to help you because I don't know much about that. But there are some of the tools I think they work on Windows and Mac. But it will be, if you use Windows or Mac, it will be just easier, just use a virtual machine. Okay, yeah. So this is a virtual machine. The user account, the username, I believe the username is also hacker. The username is hacker, password is hacker. I will give you the link tomorrow. So here I have a screenshot of the NSA tool, Gidra, the battery analysis tool, open sourced by NSA 2-3 years ago. So this is a very powerful tool. We're not going to use this a lot because we want to use the simple tools. Okay, so there will be 14 classes this semester. So there will be 14 homework. The homework include reading some book chapters, reading some white papers, blogs, and also there will be a lot of hacking, debugging in homework. So for all the homework, you have to submit before the next class on UB Nerds. So the first week, so second week we don't have class, but still you have to submit the homework. Then next Tuesday, maybe Monday night, I will give you the homework of week 2, which you have to submit before the third class. Because we are going to discuss those homework at the beginning of each class. So you have to submit before the class. If you submit within 10 minutes after the class starts, you will get a 30% penalty. If you submit after that, you do not get any points. Okay, there's no exception. Well, I mean, if you have a medical emergency, obviously that's a different story. But other than that, there's no exception. And plagiarism is a very serious problem, and it will be treated very seriously. If I find out you copied code exploit from any of your classmates, both of you, you will get 0 points. No exception for this one. You can discuss, but you cannot send me the same exploit. You cannot send me the same code. You can discuss. This discussion is actually encouraged. It helps you understand what's going on, but you cannot just copy each other. So for each hacking assignment, you will submit your exploit. You will also have a simple write-up and also screenshots to show your exploit works. The write-up just describe how you solve the challenge. If you work with someone else, you can also mention that. Like I said, discussion is encouraged, but you cannot share your code, share exploits. Also, you cannot post them online. Exams. There are 2 written exams, which the first one is week 7, I believe. 7 or 8. It's a midterm exam, and also there will be a final written exam. But I don't believe written exam can really assess how you did in this class. That's why we will have 2 CTFs in the class. One is the midterm CTF and the final CTF. So I haven't decided, are we going to use a web-based system for this, or we are just use your local VirtualBox for this? I will decide this later. So let's talk about the grades. There are 14 classes, 14 homework. Each one was 45 points. So if you do a very good job in homework, you almost passed the class, right? Then there are 2 exams, 80 points for each, 2 CTFs, 80 and 120 points. Also, I gave 30 points for free, kind of like. For the first one is attendance. If you come here every week, you get 1 point for every week. Okay, so this is attendance form. Find your name and sign in. Also, there will be 2 course evaluations in the semester. One after midterm, another one before the finals. For this one, what's the rule here? Okay, so if 90% of the students submit the evaluation, then all of the class will get some bonus points. So we have 60 people. So for, if there are more than 54 students submit evaluation, then all of the class get a bonus point, 8 points. Right? So I have, so I just gave those free. So this is, here we have the final grades. If you get 930 above that, you get an A. So last year when I offered the class, I think 40, maybe 30% of the students get an A in that class. This year probably will be different because last year we have a much smaller class, only 13 students. So this year we have 60. And last year is an all graduate class. Okay, I think I need to emphasize academic integrity once more before we dive into hacking. Discussing is encouraged. I created a Slack channel for you to discuss with each other. And also you should get familiar with policies against academic dishonesty at the university. A lot of the students, probably this is the first time you take a class in the United States. So it's very important for you to get familiar with those rules. Those are very strict, probably different from your home country. Especially this class is a hacking class. So I treat it very seriously. We have some interesting stories in this software security class. So I have a very good friend who is also the, you know, the Olympics of CTF is like the DEF CON CTF every year in Vegas. That's the Olympics of CTF. So one of my friends, he organizes DEF CON CTF. He also offers software security class at Arizona State. So there was a year, he got some suspicious email. So there was one student registered a fake Gmail account with the teacher's first name, last name, then some random numbers, and use that Gmail account to ask several other students for exploits. To say that I want to check if you can, get this before you really submit. So several students found that very suspicious and forwarded that to him. But you only have that fake email account. You cannot really link this to any student, right? So what they did is then they send the student a very special crafted share code. And that share code will expose who you are. So they send that share code to the students run that share code, exploits on that class virtual machine, then expose the who that student was, and that student didn't get any degree. So we do treat academic integrity very seriously. I believe as long as you sit here, you do all the homework, you will learn something useful, okay? And you will enjoy doing this. You have a question? Okay, you will enjoy doing this. It's not like you have to get an A, more about the learning things and enjoy hacking. Also, don't attempt to violate the law because what we are teaching in this class is hacking. We're teaching ethical hacking. And if you discover real world vulnerabilities using the knowledge you learned from this class, you should report those vulnerabilities responsibly. So all the big companies right now, they have a very mature mechanism to verify the vulnerabilities you report and also give you credits for that, either money or something else. Okay, now we are going to talk about the background knowledge we need for this class. First, we will talk about compiler, linker, and loader. So let's take a look at how we compile a C program into binary and run it on an operating system. So C is a high-level programming language. Its source code is almost human readable, but it cannot directly run on any machine. So far, no one developed a virtual machine to run C code directly. So what we need is a compiler to convert it into an executable code. And that code will consist a lot of instructions of the specific machine we want to run on. So in this class, we will use Ubuntu for that machine, and we will use GCC as a compiler. So for our research, we actually use LLVM for the compiler because we can easily develop passes. We can change the compiler. GCC is quite difficult to change. So there are 5 phases from a C program to a process running on the OS. 4 of them are part of the compiling process. We started with the pre-processing, where for each C code, the comments are removed, the macros are expanded, included files are also expanded. So if you are a good C programmer, you also know C support conditional compiling. That is also part of the pre-processing step. So basically, pre-processing will convert the code from a .c file to a .i file. But usually when you compile, just use GCC, those .i files will not be saved. That's why you don't see that. You only see the .c and the binary as that. So everything in the middle, you do not really see, okay? So the .i file is actually still C program. It's still C program. So after that, the C program will be compiled into assembly code. No one is doing from C file to binary directly. So all the compilers are compiling C programs to assembly. Then we will just use assembly compiler to compile the program into object files, those .o files. So .o files are binary files, and those files have instructions. However, they are separate. They are not linked together. Then we have linkers. to link several .o files into one big binary executable. Then that one can be loaded by your OS into the memory. When you compile a program, obviously it stays on the secondary storage, and you need to use the OS will load that into the memory so you can actually run the program. So how many of you developed a shell in the operating system class? No one took the operating system class? Did you take any operating system? No. Okay, so in operating system class, usually there is a assignment to develop a shell, right? A shell class. I see. Okay. So anyone developed a shell before? No? Shell something like this. Not shell script, the shell itself. Oops, that's my virtual machine. For example, this is my shell, right? I can type things, right? That's a shell, right? So what I use is a Z shell, and there are other shells to use, like bash, those kind of things. So I sort of, for operating system classes, I mean, first assignment was to develop a shell. So what the shell does is you type something, it could be type a program name, then the shell will launch the program, right? So if you have experience develop that, you will know how it works. You will call the system call exe cde to launch a program. So you will ask the OS to launch the program for you. That is part of the loader. Okay. So the loader is actually not part of the compiling, but its job is to verify if you have the permission to run this program. Does the program has the memory requirements? Sorry, give me 1 minute. Run out of battery. And also, the operating system will set up a new process for the program to run, set up the virtual address space, set up the MMU settings. And also the operating system will map something called interpreter into the process virtual memory. And that interpreter is also part of the loader. The interpreter is actually not a privileged program. It's in the same address space as the program you are going to load. It will load the binary into the virtual memory address. It will read the binary from the secondary storage, like the SSD, pass it, find out what other libraries it uses. It will map those binaries into the virtual address space using system calls, like memory map. So it will still ask the OS to do the job. It will also perform some necessary last minute relocation to the batteries. So we're going to use this very simple example to say how we compile C program into a binary. So this is a very simple C program. We have 3 files, main.c, and also and.c and .h. So in the C file, what do we have first? First, we have a line of comments, which is human readable, but the machine doesn't really care. Then we have a 3 include. Then we have a define. We define string here. Then we have the main function, which takes 2 arguments, then 2 local variables. A and B, the local variables of the main function. We don't really have a global variable in this program. Then we will print out how to use this. If there are 2 three arguments, then you will just add them together by calling this add function. Or the add function will not really add them together, it will also add 50 to it. Okay. So I have the code with me here. Security. So we have those files here. Let's say, let's just do a make clean first. Then we have this main file. So this is exactly the same main file. If we compare this, of course, when you compare it, you will use just GCC. You're not going to use those options. So, but here we are going to use those options. The first one is we're going to show all the words, and then we're going to save the temporary files. But the temporary files we will make it a little bit simpler. We use -p to omit those debugging information. And then we will compare this two versions we are going to compare. The first version is N32, which is the 32-bit version of this binary, and this one will give you the default one will give you the 64-bit. We're going to use optimization level 2. You can choose no optimization. And we're going to compare both three files. So if we do this, here you can say, if we do just do, let me show you the make file. So you can see this is my make file here, the make file. The make file. Oh yeah, here. So the make file says this is the compiler we're going to use, no facts, and that's basically it. So if we just do make here, so let me show you right now in this folder, we only have those two source code file and the header file and the make file, nothing else. So if we make this, after we make this, we get all kinds of 10 files. That's what I showed you in the slide. Yeah. Too small? Yeah. So now we have the original .c file. The .c file is compared to .o file and also assembly.s file and also .i file. The .h file will not be compared into anything, just a header file. The main file will be the same, .i, .o, .s. So if we look at each of those, let's look at main.i. So this is a main.i file. This one's too big. Let's try and.i. So this and.i is still very small. It's still C code. But if you compare this with and.c, you can see the difference. Right? So this is the original C code that I used to. That one is not there anymore in the .i file. You have the define base statement. That one is not there anymore. You know, have the base. Everything else is the same. The same thing for the main.c file, but it's much longer because the main file actually include a lot of header files. So here we can see at least 4 header files. And those header files will define a lot of things. They are expounded here. That's why if you go to the main.i, you can see a lot of things. And they are just defining different types. if you just go to the main function, it's still, it's just this part. This is the main function. We don't have the macro unit anymore. Embedded here directly. Yeah, so that's basically the .i file. If you check the assembly file, and you can, and this is the assembly file. You can see the assembly file here has a lot of symbols here. It finds a lot of locations. So a lot of the things right now you don't understand, but we will go through it. And also, we're really interested to compare it to generate CSE thing. That is also embedded here by the syntax we're using here is for x86, there are two syntax. One is AT&T, one is Intel. I think all the tools support both. Some people prefer AT&T, some people prefer Intel. I don't really have a preference. I can read both. So, so for this class, we probably will use both of them. You can see there are a lot of symbols in this file. Then there are two .o files. Then those two files are linked together to the final, this blue one. That's the final executable. It's just one file. If we just run and it will run the program. It tells me you have to print out the usage thing. How do you use this? So we can run 3.4. It will give me the value 57 because we get we add 50 there, right? So to show you this file, what this one is, we can do a file on this end. And it tells us this is a 32-bit L file. It's debug information there. If we, what is the other one? Let's see. So if we make and 64, then we can get the 64-bit version of this one. If you do this 64, you can say this is the version of the battery from the code using a different number. This is the battery. This is the battery file. For this battery file, we can do all kinds of analysis. One of the tool we will use, just use obj dump, object dump. We can do obj dump on and it will show us the disassembly of this. So we can look for the AND function. We have the AND function somewhere. So this is the main function here. Then where's the AND function? So this is the AND function. So a lot of what we're doing in this class is code like this. Understand what this piece of code is doing and find the vulnerabilities in this piece of code. For example, here what we say is the first one is the security feature, very important. The second one is we have a register for EIX. We move things to the stack. When we move we have an address register to the stack value. Then we will add 32. 32 in text, which is 50. When we add them together, then we just return. We're not really putting it anywhere else because the function will use AEX for the return value. AEX register the return value. So that's the AND function, and that's a 32-bit version. You can see the register we're using is AEX, ESP. If we check the 64-bit version, go to the same code, you can say it's actually shorter. It's only three instructions. So this one doesn't really matter. Here we already return, so this one doesn't really matter. So only three instructions. The first one is the same. So basically, 64-bit version uses one instruction to do all the calculations. The 32-bit version will use several instructions. And here we're using the 64-bit version of the register for RSIR. R means this is 64-bit version. We will spend the whole semester on this. So if you right now you feel it's a little bit overwhelming, it's okay. Okay, let's see. Next, we are talking about the x86 architecture. First, you need to remember that how big data on this architecture. A byte is 8 bits. A word is 16. A double word is 4 bytes. Quad word is 64 bits or 8 bytes. Double quad is 16 bytes. So remember those. For this architecture, we're using Intel architecture is a little endian. Also, actually, ARM right now is also a little endian. Cortex-A, Cortex-M, they're both little endian. Little endian means the least significant byte has lowest address. For example, the value we have is this. 7858341 and obviously, if you write this way, we know you have 4 bytes. What's the significant 78? Yeah. And in little endian, we were forward from as the lowest address. So we have 4 bytes here. And this is a endian system with this most of the significant lowest address. Usually there are some other weird systems, like they use something called middle endian, but we don't really see those anymore. Most of the systems we're using right now is little endian. For this class, everything we're using is little endian. That's very important because when you run the exploits, you need to put the bytes at its exact location. If off 1 byte, it cannot, your exploit will not be successful. So this is something you need to keep in mind. For this x86 CPUs, there are 8 general purpose registers, 8 of those. Each general purpose register is 4 bytes. There is one flag register, we call it extended flag. The E stands for extended. It's probably extended from a very old version with 16-bit Intel architecture. For example, everyone probably knows the very first Intel CPU was 8086? No, before that they have other commercial version. I think 8008, that's probably the first one. So those are 8 bits. So then there are 16-bit, I think starting from 83, 86, it's 32-bit. That's why we say now things are 32 bits. Then only in the recent 10 years, we moved into 64-bit. Then there is another special register called instruction pointer register, the EIP, instruction pointer. E also is extended because older version there is a 16-bit version. There are some other special purpose registers we will talk about. So this is a graph view of those registers. 8 general purpose registers. AEX, EAX, EPX, EKX, EDX, ABCD, ESI, EI, ESP, EDP. So they're actually very easy to remember if you we start with E that because it's extended from the previous version. Then you have ABCD, and ABCD you can work with follow. For example, the door is 8 bit, you can do AL, AH, and the 16 bit, you can do the whole thing with 60 bit. Yes, so just do backward comparable with 8 bit or 16 bit on the same port. Then you have those four registers. So S1 is source index, EI is destination index. So you move down from memory to memory. So this one usually is a pointer going to the source. This one usually is a pointer going to the destination. So of course, I mean, you don't have to do that. If you are a symbol developer, you can use any register without any of that. But usually, there will be some binary level protocol, binary level standard the compiler will follow. So when the compiler generates code, the compiler will overshoot AES to do additions. And actually, the hardware level, there could be some optimization. If you use AES for addition, it may be faster than you use other registers. That's possible. And also, there is ESP. This one is very, very important. In this whole semester, we're going to our based on this. So SP is stack pointer. When there's EPT, we are also going to have EPT. So this is basically the most important register you need to know. And this is much different from every architecture is much different. So the one I researched on ARM. So ARM has many, many more general purpose registers. So for Intel, only 8. 32-bit, only 8. For ARM, there are much more. And the ARM doesn't really have this it does have ESP. Also, there is the 32-bit E flag register, just to carry some flags. There are carry flag, parity flag, zero flag, sign flag. Those are what you learned probably from computer organization course and also assembly language course. Yeah. So the EIP register, it holds the address of the next instruction to be executed. Very interesting is in x86, 32-bit version, you cannot really directly read or write to this register. There is no instruction for you to do that. 64-bit there is, 32-bit there is no. There is no instruction like move or data to EIP, no such thing. For other architecture ARM, we have those. But you can still change this, but not directly a move. So this is a picture of the 64. I think this is almost all the registers in the x64. Another name for the x64 is for AMD64. So the standard for x64 Intel has their own version of 64 used by in their servers. But for most PCs, even Intel is using the AMD system. Eight general registers. 64 version, everything. So EAX becomes RAX, EJAX becomes RDX. And also, there are several new so those are still in general. The CR registers are completely basically this system register. For example, CR3. So instead of setting those computers with MMX for multimedia, to look for basically to me means I can use it to play video games. So that's because the N goes XML. So those are basically to do all kinds of floating point calculation, good for video games, which requires a lot of computing, and also to much bigger versions. Oh, this comes from actually 500 much bigger than very 100. So those are the registers for vector calculations. We're not going to do in our class. So next, we are going to talk about the instructions. So all the x86 or 64, x64 instructions, they look like this. There is so you have all this. There's opcode, and there is your arguments. Up to equal arguments. That's your optional label. Some of the instructions don't really have any arguments. Some of them can free. So the arguments can either be a number, a register, or a memory address. So I'm going to say something very concrete. Here I list several example instructions. The first one is just obviously doesn't use any argument, zero argument. So another one is item 3, and 1 is your argument. That's why the argument can be when this is a I'm trying to see how to use it. So this is signed, multiply, and like I said, we're going to use AT&T syntax and Intel syntax in the class. I will give you some readings to do to get yourself familiar with your syntax. The AT&T syntax, the first part doesn't really have anything to do with what syntax. So the instructions, we can divide them into several categories. The first one is data movement. You move data from memory to memory, move data from register to register or memory to register. Then there are calculations, all kinds of calculations. Then there are control flow instructions. So in AT&T syntax, there is a percentage sign you use before the name of the register. You have to use that percentage sign as we saw here, right? So here, this is the add function, and every register there's a percentage sign. You tell us this is a register. Without that percentage sign, there will be a syntax error. You can use the full register and partial register for some of those. And for memory address, the syntax is very interesting. You put a register there, then you use parentheses. This to indicate the value in that register means the address. You're actually talking about a memory address. You're not talking about the register. For example, we'll go back to this AND. We go back to this AND. So this EX here is the register. You are using the value directly. Then the front part of this, there are two registers, REI, RSI. Then we use the parentheses in process, which means the calculation inside we're reference to a memory address. We're not moving anything to those registers directly. We're moving to the address that a register points to. Maybe it's easier to go to the 32-bit version. Okay, 32-bit version is separate. For example, we have a move instruction. The AS is a register. We have some value inside. We're going to move the value of AS into the secondary location, which is going to provide ESP minus a plastic. So ESP is the stack number. What is it? The memory has ESP plastic. That's all. It can be syntax. Let me check if I can get use entire syntax. I think this is entire. Oh yeah, this is entire. Okay, this is exactly the same thing. Same binary code. In the entire syntax, we are using. Oh, sorry. So we're actually doing this part. So what we're doing is we're moving ESP block state. That is a memory address. And from there, we're getting 4 bytes. So that 4 bytes into a. So the second instruction similar, but instead of using loop, we're just adding. We're adding the ESP plus 4. We're using that memory address, get 4 bytes from there, and adding that to the EX. So the first instruction, we actually move something from stack to the EX. The second instruction, we add another 4 bytes from stack to the EX. So that's why how we're adding 2 values together. We first put those 2 values on stack, then use 2 instructions to add them. Then we add the 50 in decimal to the EX. So you can say, if you are new to this, probably the entire syntax is easier to understand. Okay, so to get an entire syntax, you just do so here are some examples. Talk about this one. This one we are treating that as a pointer. For AT&T syntax is actually like moving from this to this. So entire syntax is so this one is moved from memory to this one is also move from memory to index. So the index here is actually, so we're basically doing ESI minus 4 to index. Some kind of a simple multiply. You can say ESI ES times 1 is 1. So you can say this instruction is perfect for some kind of array operations. Right? So EAX, so ESI here can be used as the start of the array. Then EAX will be used as the index of the array. And the 1 here is actually the size of each item in the array. In this case, the size of the item is 1. If it's an integer, it can do 4. So those things, so those are very convenient for array operations. This one, the first one is actually the same. The third one is moving from register to memory. The fourth one is moving from memory to register. So if you say the parentheses, you know, we're talking about memory. If you go to the Intel version, you can say the memory is not using parentheses, but brackets. So that's a syntax difference. This one is actually the same. So we are moving the value 2 into EDX. There is a process is that the EDX is 22. But the 2 is converted to 80 or 60 or 62. And that's why we have very basic instructions to do that. We just add the value after the instruction to byte. And with this, we're only moving 1 byte into the memory reference byte. Yeah. We're not moving 4 bytes. Here we're talking about moving 2 bytes. So that's why if you see those, don't be surprised. But anyway, when you start reading disassemblies, if you say some instructions you don't know what they are, you just Google, okay? So we already talked about a move instruction. One of the very important instruction, important for us, for security, is this push instruction. This will just push data onto the stack. And the stack, where the stack is now specified in this instruction. Where the stack is where the ESP register points to. For example, here we have several. We can push the number, we can push a memory location, we can push over here. So from here, we're pushing the X. And we are pushing the value of X onto the stack. And the stack goes up. And the stack address is at where ESP points to. So if we have a push, obviously we also have pop. And a pop, we have 2 instructions. We can pop into register. We can also pop into a memory location. We can directly pop into a memory location. Another very confusing instruction is this one. It's for the node effective of X. You can Google this after class. Mainly, we use this for, you can say a lot of work. If you have some experience in reverse engineering, you can say this instruction is not used to do any node. It's actually do a quick calculation. For example, let's say this instruction, LPA, then there is memory, and we know that we are going to go to this one. Whatever, that's a memory location. Don't let any the effective address of that memory location. Exactly this. There's nothing to do with what we actually store in the memory. What is instruction is to move the value of the plus CSI. But there's no instruction to do that, called a calculation of this plus and multiply. That's why where a lot of you can see a lot of code is using this trick to do this. There will be add instructions, sub instructions, distract instructions. We're not going to talk about all of them. It's a little bit boring, but when you say something you don't know what it is, just Google it. For control flow instructions, the first one we have is jump. It will just transfer the control flow to an instruction at a memory location. And there are direct jump and indirect jump. Direct jump is something like this: jump label or jump intermediate value. That scenario is the answer. Jump before answer. However, there are instructions jump to X instead. The difference is what kind of jump label you can know where the program is going at. We don't want the program. But target. However, for EAX and VX, you have to run the program and to this point, you know why the value you get. That will be very challenging if you want to analyze the program. So there are a lot of tricks to stop people from analyzing the program. One of them is just using a lot of indirect jumps. There are conditional jumps. It starts with J is jump. Then there are conditions: equal, not equal, 0, greater than, those kind of things. For example, we have EDX and EAX. We compare those values. By comparing, we subtract EAX from EDX. So when we do some subtraction, we will change the flag register. Then the JRE instruction based on the flag register will decide which branch to pick. So those kind of like the C-level if else instructions. Are you guys coming back? Okay. Also, I just showed you the compare instructions. You can compare registers and compare memories, locations. Another very important instruction is the call instruction. It's for subroutine calls. This instruction does two things. It is one instruction. It performs two operations. The first one is push the current code location onto the stack, and the stack is pointed by CSE. Then it performs an unconditional jump to the code location indicated by the label. Of course, it's also the method. This is super important because a lot of hacking we're doing is to hijacking the concept. If there is call, there is return as well, and the return is just a return. There's no argument. There's a version of return. Call a code location of the stack that actually the program has. So this one directly controls what is the next instruction we're going to use. This one is super important. A lot of what we're doing is for connected. example, I said that it's return-oriented programming. So return is set. We're just try to exploit this. If we go back to that simple example, we go to the main function. Main function is a little bit long. Let's say, where do they call add? Should be clear. Here. Here we can see where the call to the add. And we know that add function has two arguments, right? We know the two arguments are on the stack. That's why the main function is to put those arguments on the stack. That's why we should push it. The first push is get so the one that we don't already know. So the push get so that is our second. So we push get cycle back. And we're going to the add function. And that call instruction will put the current folder address to the stack. So the stack is actually profile there. Then we will use this address to run the add function. The add function after we run this process, we're going to return. But it will return whatever is on the stack. So this function doesn't have the stack. The stack is unchanged. The previous main function, the call instruction, put the return address on the stack. That's why the return instruction here will find that address and use that address into that. Then we will go back to the main function. Now we can go back to main function line 1144. That's all we can do. That's the push pop call and return. As you can see, I have already talked about several times. One important stack is how important those instructions. So we'll talk about the shadow stack, it's trying to protect the stack. We talk about the return-oriented programming, it's trying to exploit those return instructions. A little bit about the stack. For the architecture we are using, the stack always goes down. Intel goes down, ARM also goes down. So when we push a value to the stack, the ESP actually goes down. When we pop a value, the value of the ESP actually increment. There are also some other instructions we will not talk about today. They are, for example, the enter instruction. Certainly to push the event instruction. So these three instructions we will say a lot in the future. Let's think about it with this. State the LC stack, so move the current, move the ESP value to it. This is used a lot to the beginning of our functions because the subtract here actually what it is doing. Variable space is creating a room for the local variables. In your C class, you know the local variables are on the stack. The global variables are not on the stack. And this is the instruction. Create a room for local variables, just for subtract. We will look at this later, maybe next class. So if there is enter, there is leave. So leave is equivalent to this. Just leave to restore. That's the process. That's the leave instruction. 64 version is very similar. There are some new instructions, there are some new registers. Obviously, we're not going to talk about all of them. If you see something you don't know, just Google. But we are going to compare a little bit of the 64 version and the 32-bit version. So I have another program here. Very short program. We have a main function and two local variables. The local variables are understand. Both of them are 64. So that is not 64. Because we have a 32-bit architecture, we not store that 64 bits value, right? We need a 2 register to do the job. If we're 64 version, we need 1 register to do the job. Then we have 3 arguments. We're going to add those 2 together. For that, we will shift out the size of lambda. So we're going to whatever we get here is string. So we have to change that to so this function is the first one we're using a pointer. That's because we're giving the address. We're not doing passing by reference, passing by value. To learn from which class is that. Anyway, so here we're getting the value and so compare those 2 versions. I already compiled. Let's see. Let's do a clean. Let's do a matrix. Okay. It should be long. 64. Okay, that's just a warning. Doesn't matter. Okay. So we first run the program. We run this. Let's add something like this. Okay. So you can see the size of lambda is basically 32 bits. The size of lambda is 8 bytes. If we run the 64 version, what will be the size of lambda? It's still 8 bytes. Okay. The reason is it has to be consistent at the C level. No matter what you are using lambda at C level and then sync to the same. Okay. So, but if we add them together, we can see that everything is the same. But if we check the battery code, let's see what's the best way to do this. We are going to do an object dump the 64 version here. We are looking at it here. Probably too small. Oh, this one is okay. So this is 64. This is a 64-bit version of that addition. If we go to the 32-bit version of this, here, let's look at the 32-bit version. We do an object down. Where is that? And you see the and? I don't see it. Oh, should be L and. Oh yeah, it's here. This is a 32-bit version. The 32-bit version, we are adding two 64-bit values together. We don't have only 64-bit available. So here we use 32-bit. So yeah, we use that. So moving the value from that to the ABS. But we're only using 4 bytes. The value is actually 8 bytes. 4 bytes ABS. We're using a lot of 4 bytes to ABS. Then we need the location of the point. So we are using 2 bytes. Then here is the next. So now we add the bottom half of that. So adding 4 bytes with 4 bytes. After adding that, if there is a carry, we will set the flag. Then the next one we're using the addition with carry instruction. So we clear that carry. So we're using 2 instructions to add 2 32-bit value. So we are so we can achieve having 32 bits. So 5 instructions, 6 instructions to do that. 64-bit of it, only 3 instructions. Okay. So that's the difference. We do the same thing using 2 different architectures. So next, we are going to talk about Linux permission groups. In Linux, this is related to how we design the flags. In Linux, each file or directory has 3 permission groups: owner group, group, and others. So owner is the user who owns the file, and usually it's the user who created the file, and the owner permissions apply only to the owner. And the group can have multiple users, and the group permissions applies to the group that assigned to the file. Then there are others. And then the permissions, there are 3 types: read, write, and execute. Read means someone can read the file, write can mean write, execute means can run this as a binary. But not necessarily binary, share can also be run. Yeah. So this is example, what do you do with LS in your file system? LS, then you can get something like this. The first column is the file type. B means this is a directory. So this is so Python means this is just a regular file. After this, we have the permissions. And you can see that we actually have 9 columns. That's why for each group, we have 3 permissions. The first one is read, the second one is write, the third one is execute. The first one is owner, the second one is group, the third one is everyone else. Then we have this column showing how many other files are pointing to here. The owner means who created the file, and the group means who does this file. This file is linked with any group. So here, no specific group. That's why both the owner and the group shows my name. Then we have file size. Last time this is modified, and also the name of the file. Okay, so that's very basic. Then after that, we have something special called the set UID programs. This is a very powerful mechanism in Linux and Unix system. Windows doesn't really have this. Windows have a different mechanism. So the file permissions guards who can access which file on the file system. An executable or a program is stored as a file on the local storage, right? Then when that file is loaded into memory, it becomes a process. And when it becomes a process, there are 3 IDs associated with that process. The first one is called the real UID, the real user ID. So this is the user ID of the user that created this process. It's not the owner of the program. For example, when I type ls in my shell, it actually runs the program ls. And the real ID, the real UID of that ls is me, because I created that. I created that process, but I do not own the executable ls. Okay. Then the second thing is called effective UID. Effective UID is the UID the OS use to manage the privilege of the process. So the effective UID is not necessarily real UID, especially for set UID programs. Save the UID we're not going to use much, so we can skip that. So the kernel decides if the process has a privilege by looking at the effective UID. So for most of the programs, the effective UID is the same as whoever started this program. So when I type ls, ls is not a set UID program. When I type ls, the process ls is created, and the effective UID is me. The real UID is also me. However, there is a special type of program called set UID program, and those programs, when those programs are launched, the real UID is whoever started that program, but the effective UID is the owner of the program. So here is an example. So I just released several applications under the bin folder, and you can see all those programs. Bash, nothing special. They're just regular applications. However, the invite so 2 applications, SU, switch user, and unlock. Those are different colors. What really different is here. In this column, it's not showing X, it's showing S. You can see those two. S means this is a set UID program. So when I run this switch user program, program is doing. However, the effective user of this program is root, because the owner of this program is root. So all other programs, the owner is also root. However, one copy, even though the owner of the copy is root, why wrong is the effective ID, real ID, both new. So this one is different. Okay. So there are a lot of programs like this. Even a lot of like web servers, they have to set as a set UID program. This is quite a unique mechanism in Linux and the Unix systems. The reason we talk about this is for a lot of hacking we are doing, the challenges are designed as set UID program. So how it works is there will be a vulnerable program, and that vulnerable program belongs to the root. And that program is a set UID program. Then you exploit that program, then you will be able to get a root privilege to read the flag file. If you do not exploit the program, even if you get a shell of your shell, you will not be able to read that flag, because that flag is owned by the root. Does that make sense? Usually that's how it's designed for CTF. I actually have another demo for this, but I think I will leave this as part of your homework to do this on your own box. So I created this file to read passwords, and you are supposed to compile this and change this file of a set UID program and a regular program, and you can read a password there. Another very important piece of background knowledge is Elf files, but we're going to spend long time on this one. So today I will just give you a quick overview of what Elf file is. So Elf file shorts for executable and linkable format. It's a common standard for all kinds of executable files for Linux and Unix systems. They have all kinds of different extensions. So you know that in Linux, anything, it's what a program can do is not really associated with extension. It's different from Windows. So you can, but usually you can see all kinds of extensions from AXF, Beam, Elf, even .o file, or kernel object file. Those are or static library also. They're all different extensions we usually use for Elf files. And there are also files that do not have extensions. They are Elf files. But they always have the same file format, the Elf header. So to know if a file is a valid Elf file, you can just use something like file. So file command. For example, in this folder, we have 4 files. Only 2 of them are Elf files. If we do file on makefile is obviously not an Elf file. Then it will tell us this is just text. And it actually tells us this is makefile. Then if we do main.c, it tells us this is also text. Looks like C source code. If we do file on this one, it will tell us this is an Elf file. Little endian, this is an interpreter, which is a loader for it. And this is dynamically linked. If we do a LLD on this one, sorry, LDD, I guess. Yeah, if we do a LDD on this one, we can actually say what libraries this file is linked against. First of all, it linked against the libc library, against this loader, and also there is a gate. I think this is for fast context switch from the user land to the kernel. So L files, they have a lot of sections, which we will talk about next week. No, 2 weeks from now. About several important ones you can remember. The code usually operates as a text section, CSE, GOT, UT for function for library for tables. Which one? What is P? Okay. Yes, yes. I just don't remember what it stands for. COT is probably the global offset. Then we have a data section used for pre-initialized global data. So if you have a global variables in your C code, that is usually go to the data section. So there will be read-only data. For example, you define some macros, you define some constants, a string, right? Those data you're not supposed to change when you run the program. And those data will go to the new data section, PSF or uninitialized data. And for C standard, actually PSF has to be equal to 0 in C standard. But what interesting is for BSS, since they are not initialized, which means the value doesn't really matter. So if the value doesn't matter, why do you need to store them in the program image, in the L file, right? You only need to know the address of those things at runtime. You don't need, there is no initialized value. That's why the BSS, actually there's no initialized value, but the loader, when you load those, you will say, hey, there's a variable, then I'm going to initialize this to 0. Those are a lot of tool chains to do operations on L files, which you will do in your homework. Obviously, we use specific compile that. We use the read L to pass the header. We use the object dump to disassemble that. We use the main. Anyway, this is a tool to say the symbols of the code, the binary. For example, we have we can do unam on this one. It tells me all the symbols. For example, there's a symbol for main function. There's a symbol for the add function, and this is the add object. And there are other symbols. For example, this one is actually function code. The library code is and those are unresolved. So dynamically, right now we don't know the address. The loader will tell us. So at the runtime, the loader will tell us where they are. And also we can say D here. D means data, T means text, O, U means unresolved. So there's uppercase, lowercase. I guess lowercase means this is the internal function only. The uppercase probably means other libraries can call it. Also, we can, there's a patch file, so we can change some properties. And after we change that, it's here a legit file. There's an object copy. We can copy some specific sections. For example, I'm only interested in the text of this L file. So we can use the object copy. So in the share code class, we're going to use this tool. I already developed some script for you to use, but it's better for you to know those tools exist. Also, there is a strict tool to strip out the debugging information, symbol information of a file. For example, here, if we do file on this node, we can say this is not strict, right? So this binary has a lot of symbol information. When we do this, we can say a lot of symbols. Those symbols we can use for debug. The debuggers relies on those. But we can strip this we strip it? Strip. How do we simply strip everything? Oh, strip all. Python. Okay, cool. So if we strip all LADD, now we already strip this one. When we do a file on this one again, you can see that this one is stripped. Okay, previous is not stripped. Then let's do a name on this one again. We do not get any symbols. So those simple information are stripped out. So it will make the debugging process much harder. It will make the file smaller. There are a lot of legit reasons to do these features. If you develop a program, you don't want people to know how your program works, then you want to strip it. And a lot of reverse engineers' job is to reconstruct all those kind of knowledge without having those symbol information. There are also a lot of libraries and online tools to help you understand ELF. You can try later. Next piece of knowledge is memory map of Linux process. We will use the 32-bit version as an example. So for Linux or any multitasking operating systems, we can run many different processes at the same time. And they all need their own memory address. For 32-bit version means each process has 32-bit memory address, which is 4 GB. And they have their own 4 GB. But you know, the physical memory address probably is smaller than that. So it's an illusion for each process. And that is achieved by the hardware part of the CPU, the module called the Memory Management Unit, MMU. So, and those virtual addresses, they are mapped to physical addresses by page tables. Like I said, page tables are stored on the physical process, the kernel, they have their own page table. There's only one MMU. That's why we need to do a context switch to change from process A to process B. The kernel has to change the address of the process B's page tables into MMU. So when you put in the translation, it's translated to process B page tables, not process A's page tables. So if we only look at one process, right now it's much more complicated than this because we have a lot of security features to randomize things in the middle of this semester. Without those security features, this is a 32-bit version, what the memory looks like for each process. First of all, we have 4 GB memory space. First, the higher 1 GB is actually for kernel. So the code will not write really from those. So right there, the MMU will generate the 4. Then we have a stack. The stack goes down to lower addresses. So we have the memory mapping section. Usually, those are the dynamic libraries. For example, loaded, the three libraries, they will be mapped to since those are shared libraries, basically there could be only one copy of those in the memory. But for each process, to that process, it looks like they are here. Okay. It could be different for different process. Each process virtually, those libraries are mapped to different virtual. But basically, there's only one copy and the physical memory. Then there's a key. You can use PRK system ports, or system ports, PRK, to change the size of the key. So the key goes up, the stack is goes down. Then we have the code section for the battery, the instructions. Because they are mapped to addresses like this. Then we have data section, only the data section. So those addresses like this doesn't really matter anymore because modern OS will randomize the memory layout. The older version, it will just randomize where the code is. It could start at this address, it could be higher, it could be lower. All of those is just to make it much harder for attackers to explore this. A newer version can actually move everything around. So the system we're using, no matter your desktop, laptop, or even your phone, your Android Apple, they will randomize everything. The same program, if you run twice, it will have different. It will be at different addresses. We will look at that after Stack Overflow. Actually, there will be challenges for you to break those kind of randomizations because they're not perfect. They still can be hacked. One interesting thing is to make randomization work, the first requirement is your address space should be big. If your address space is very small, then no matter how much you can randomize, the attacker can still guess really fast, right? That's one requirement. The second requirement is the all current address space neural randomization, they use MMU because physically you don't have to move it, but virtually you can just change the page table. You can change them to different locations. So MMU is required. But for devices we are working on, there are low-end devices, there's no MMU, there's no virtual address, everything's physical. And we are thinking about how we can do randomization for those kind of devices. That is one of the research we are doing. So something called null pointer in C or C++. This is a little bit special because it means it doesn't really point to anywhere. It means the pointer is invalid. It's not initialized, and it should not be dereferenced. So if you look at the C version of this, null pointer actually points to address 0. That's very interesting. Because address 0, why it's invalid? The memory starts from address 0. Why it's invalid? Right? What? Result of what? Because it is result or it doesn't use. It's starting from not really. That's not really the reason. But anyway, this is the C version, and this is the modern C++ version. You can say the modern C++ version, the law is not really defined as 0 anymore. Okay, but when they design the C or when they design any program before that, they want something to null pointer. They want to design that to point to something doesn't exist, right? However, physically, memory address 0 does exist. That is some real thing that if you dereference there, you should get something, right? So the real implementation is in the kernel MMU. We have the physical address, we have the virtual address. For any program, any process, the virtual address space, maybe the first page, like 4K, including address 0. It's not mapped to any physical address. So if you do a reference, when you in C program, when you do a reference, you are dereferencing the virtual address, right? But that virtual address is not mapped to any physical address. That's how the OS achieves that. So it will generate a page fault. But if you work on some systems like what we work on, we don't have MMU. We only have physical address. The physical address does have something. That's usually our flash. So you can use that 0 as a valid address. So this is something I feel very interesting. Okay, so I have another example here to show Let's see. Which one going to process now? Okay, this is another simple program. It doesn't do anything. We will just get an input from the user. If I not get anything, so if we compile this program, we run this program. Let's see how do we do this. Well, we probably need two terminals. Two terminals to do this. Let's see. We run the program. The program is running. Then we are going to use a tool called PMap to what is it? So the PID of this program is this one. Okay. So now we're going to use the PMap. It's a little bit small. So this program here is running, and so we have the same library. After we have the then we have all the sections from the program here. Not all those regions are code. For example, the first one is read only. So that's probably some kind of a read only data. Then this one is read and execute. So that's probably code, right? Then this one is probably another, some kind of a data section. And this is read write, probably there's a global data section you can write. So this is the 32-bit version of this. If we run the 64-bit version, then we do the same thing here. We need to get the PID first. The 64-bit version, you can see there are some new sections, like the virtual system call, the box, the stack, library, but some new sections. So all of this you were doing your homework. Let's keep moving. Oh, we already said this. Okay, this is probably the last piece of background knowledge we will talk about today. It's system calls. So how many of you are familiar with system calls? Okay, you use the system calls in programming? Yes, yes. So basically, system call is the API provided by the kernel to the programs, to a userland program. And they have some standard interface. There are standard in system calls, so even different operating systems, they can provide similar system calls. So when a userland application wants to use a service provider kernel, they will just use a system call. And there are, at the C level, it's called system call. At the binary level, there are special instructions to do the system calls. Here it's called usually int. There are several others. There also is a system call instruction for the syscall. It's a quite new one. Yeah. So when that instruction is executed, the system enters the kernel. It goes to the interrupt table, and the kernel will perform the services and return to the process. Usually, C programmers will not call system calls directly. You will call C library calls, C library functions. For example, in C, you have been using functions like read, like write. Those are C functions. But those C functions, they are wrappers for system calls. Eventually, it goes to system calls. For Unix systems, Linux systems, those are the system calls we are familiar with. Open, read, write, close, read, fork, exit, kill. Not only those are system call names. There are utilities have the same name. That we using kill. Some of you use Linux. At some point you use the kill utility, right? Those eventually map to the system call with the same name kill. Okay. Then there is a fork to create a process. There are so many system calls. Linux usually have, I'm not sure right now. So this number could be a little bit outdated. At least there's 300 different system calls. Windows, they have more than 700 system calls. So system calls are interfaces to enter the kernel. So there could be a lot of those. So there is something interesting several years ago called the DARPA ground challenge. DARPA cyber ground challenge. Ground cyber challenge. Yeah, DARPA ground cyber challenge. So basically, it's a machine-to-machine hacking event organized by DARPA. And the winning team got 2.2 million cash, I think, those string attached. And the first three teams also got a big amount of cash. So DARPA, they organize this kind of challenges every decade. 20 years ago, they organized the DARPA ground challenge, which is autonomous driving challenge. If you go to YouTube, search DARPA ground challenge, you can see that 20 years ago, DARPA has been organizing those autonomous car driving competitions. So 4, 5, 6 years ago, they have the cyber ground challenge. It's a machine-to-machine hacking. So there are 10 teams in the finals. Part of the DEFCON that year. So those machines, they run a special operating system developed by DARPA. That operating system only has like fewer than 10 system calls. On top of that machine, they have to run their analysis tools to attack other machines. Okay? So DARPA want to limit the number of system calls to make it controllable. That's why they designed a special OS with only like 10 or fewer than 10 system calls. But for real world systems, we have many system calls. And we are going to look at some of them, especially when you write a shell code. We are going to directly call those system calls at binary level, assembly level. So, like I said, if you are a C developer, you do not directly call those system calls. You call the wrapper functions, and those wrapper functions usually have the same name of the system call name. Well, actually, for system call, the name doesn't really matter. The name, for example, we have the change directory system call. The string change down is not associated with that system call anyway. Well, at a binary level, there's only numbers, right? For assembly level. So we have several tools we can use to check what system calls a program use. For example, let's say we use the same program the addition. This is a very simple program, but even with this simple program, it will call a lot of system calls. Okay. This is a simple program that adds two values together. We just give it the argument, so it will print out the unit, right? You will not really do that. Let's see what system calls we have. The first one is the shell will create a new process using the CSE CVE system. Then we will change the permission process, then this library is available, and we memory map, we check other libraries available, open a file. This is available in that's another part. So memory map is to map something to the memory map. Okay? So after all this, so far we're not really running the program. So we're going to regular file, that L file, and map that L file into that. From here. So actually, here we are setting up the thing. So after this, we are actually running the program. So we run the program. Remember, this program, we didn't give this program. Where is it? It's main. I'm a little bit tired. Okay. So this program cannot do anything, right? There's no argument, there's a symbol. So this is the system code to actually bring right system code. So we're writing to STD out. The value what? So STD in is one. That's a file descriptor number. STD out is what? STD in is 0. So that's why we're writing to file descriptor 0, 1, 2, 3. And after that, we do it. So this is without giving any arguments. If we give arguments to the same system call, we trace what system calls it does. We can say that the following sequence. But we're going to control point. Here, so here, from the right, so we're actually writing out so this is only system call. This is not showing us each instruction this program is running, but only showing us what system call you're using. And also, there is a library trace tool to do similar things. It can trace what library functions this program has been called. Or this program doesn't call any library function. Even if we add argument, it will not use any. Yeah, it doesn't give us anything. Let's say, let's do a L trace ls. What's going on? Maybe this one is a statically compiled. Okay, we cannot find any library called this one. So that's air trace and S trace. So in this class, we are going to make system calls at the assembly level, not at the C level. This is a list of the system call available on Linux. The first column is system call number, and that number should be stored in EAX. Then there is a system call name. This name is not visible to the end. Then the argument for the depends on how many argument you have. For example, X8, the first system call only has one argument. Tail, we have a shell. What is the return value? That's basically, for example, in C, at the beginning of the main function, you can return something. You can return 0, you can return 2, you can overflow. And that is what is system call for the X8. Let's say if you have a real system call that will read something from a fire system, that's why in there, 55 files mass and name. So let's try to decipher what this piece of code does. I'm showing you the table here. I'm showing you the piece of instruction. And let's try to decipher what it does. The first instruction is XOR EX and EX. What does that mean? If you XOR anything, what do you get? What? Yeah. What do you say? No, you get all zeros because they're the same, right? 1, 1 will get 0, 0, 0 will also get that. So this one will, the first instruction will 0 off EX. After the first instruction, EX has value 0. You are going to push that value 0 to the text. So we push another thing, like a random there to a stack. Let's say we have a marker here. Anyway, so we push those two things to a stack. So after we push this, the ESP will point to whatever you push to it. Then we move the value of ESP to ESP. Then we push X again, which is 0, because it's just the instruction to do X. So we're not here, 0, then we push X there, EX, which also points to the string actually. So the address of that string back again. Then we move that pointer to EX. Then we're going to move E to AL. We're going to move value 11 to AL. And AX is 0, so AL was 0. After moving AL, we'll have the value 11. Then we're going to execute the system call instruction with 80. This is the system call instruction. 80 is power. Because this one generates the interrupt, and the interrupt number is in text. The system call number here is 11. Then let's go back to the system call table. 11 is a get system. So basically, we're for this system call. We're trying to create some process. So next, let's figure out what the process is. First, so left-hand side, we still have the code. Right-hand side, we'll have the stack. The stack goes down. The ESP points to some random address. Doesn't really matter at this point. First, we 0 out EX. The stack is not changed. Then we push 0. So we push EX, which is 0 there. Then we push those 4 bytes. We push 8 bytes there. Then, so those bytes are actually this part. So it's actually this. I should have more slides after this. It's weird. Oh, there should be several more slides to animation here. Probably didn't send by mistake. But do you guys get an idea? Okay. So after this, so basically after we do this, we're pushing all arguments to the stack. This one is the first one is the string, then the address of the string, and just a variable. So that we create the execution code to give us. This is another book I recommend to you. This is a Linux system programming. This is a good book to help you understand how to do Linux programming. The first one you should do is a C book. The other one is a libc programming. Then this one is you can imagine this one a lot of ramp functions of system calls. The last one, do we still have time? I have 20 minutes. Okay. In Linux, there's something called environment variables and share variables. Many of you have been used in Windows to have similar things. You define a name of the variable and the value of the variable, and the kind of thing. Basically, that's string actually. And this is a syntax. Those variables, when you define those variables in a shell, then you run a program, and those variables will be inherited by that program. Okay, so that's a very interesting thing. How does it work? You define something in your shell. Why it can be inherited by the process later? That's because the shell, the kernel, will actually copy those things to the memory address of that program. So those are standard variables. There are commands to do that. Part of your homework will do that. What I really want to show you guys is the stack. Is the stack part. At the top of the stack, we will have those environment variables. So in later process, we will previously that. And also on top of the stack, there will be a command line argument. That's why we did there. Add 2-3. 2-3 will actually place here by the loader. The loader is doing that job. Okay. Last part, there are a lot of binary analysis tools. We have been using file. We didn't use strings today, but that one is simple. It will show you the ASCII strings in a binary file. Object dump is something we are going to use a lot. We're not going to use Overflow or Debugging a lot in the class. Like I said, we want to use very basic tools. That actually, I think that's a very good practice to improve your reverse engineering ability. If you don't directly go to Eip or Ghidra, you will think, oh, everything is so simple because the software or analysis tools already do all the job for you. But for some of the challenging ones, we do use those tools to help you understand what's going on. For debug, we're going to use GDB. I'm going to post some GDB cheat sheet there for you to use. You don't have to go through this today. Okay, so that's basically it for today. There will be homework. I will post them maybe early tomorrow. If you next Monday before 5, then after that I will post the homework 2, which is due before the class of the 3rd week. Any questions so far? How many of you will drop the class now? Those two are resolved. Any questions? Yeah. You don't have to. You can go to 4, 4, 5, 7. Well, I don't really use the man myself, right? So I don't think it's necessary. Most of the tools are very easy to use. Yes, we're going to provide the Any other questions? Yeah, everything, slides, recording, online, and also very basic. Have a good night, guys.
I'm not sure if we have an answer, but I was just wondering